morning. Welcome back to another episode of Breakdowns for Breakfast. I am your host, Danger, and joining me is my co-host, who I cannot properly break down an album without, Monster. Say hi, Monster.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
Hey, you remembered to ask.
I did.
I'm miserable. Everything sucks. Thanks for asking.
Okay. All right.
That's not true. I'm fine.
Okay. I was about to say, like, the conversation we were having just moments ago, you didn't seem miserable.
I was saving it for the show.
Yeah. On this episode of Breakdowns for Breakfast, we are going to be talking Protest the Hero album Kezia. Is it Kezia or Kezia?
Kezia.
Okay, I kept pronouncing it Kezia in my head. So, Protest the Hero Kezia, released in Canada, August 30th, 2005. All right. You decided to bring this one to the breakfast table, Monster. So why?
This is a band that I think doesn't get enough recognition. I think they are super, super talented, incredible songwriters, and with this new influx of gent and super technical bands, I feel like Protest the Hero was super way ahead of the curve. And I think that they've got this good balance of proggy song structure with these crazy riffs and technical playing styles, but they still manage to put hooks and earworms into their songs. This is one of those bands that I blame for not being able to listen to bands like Tool, because whenever somebody tells me, "Oh my God, Tool's so cool, it's so cool," it's like, no, it's not. It's boring. Why? Because I listened to this for so long.
That explains why. the why that gives you more of a background as to your dislike of Tool.
Well, just this style in general. A little bit of backstory. I believe it was my cousin in Pennsylvania, Adam. We share a lot of musical tastes. He's the one who turned me on to these guys. And Kezia is their first like major label album. So when I discovered them, this was all they had, but they had some like earlier stuff that I don't know if he had on CD somehow or something, but it was more like skate punk. It was just like straight up punk rock. There wasn't none of the like technical stuff. And then I don't remember what year it was, but just a year or two later, I saw them at Warped Tour.
Yeah.
This was great. They were playing on one of those smaller stages. And when they started, it was me and a handful of other guys down in the front. And there was a couple of the hardcore dancers swinging their fists and doing the kicks and stuff.
Yeah, doing that hardcore thing.
Never been my thing. No, and so I was kind of like stepping back and whatever. And after a song or two, Rhodey, the lead singer, he says, hey, what's up, everybody? We're Protest the Hero. So I see a lot of hardcore kids in the audience, and, a bunch of them start cheering and stuff. He said, it's real hard to be a hardcore kid. You got to wear your sister's pants and be an asshole to everybody. You guys can get out of the way. And like literally told them to leave.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm in love.
So it's funny that you mentioned like the just the punk stuff that they have before, because there's quite a few moments on here where that punk really shone through the mathcore mathcore. So between hardcore and math rock. So it was like it just had punk flavoring on stuff, and I thought that was a fun move.
Yeah, I listened to an interview. I think this was actually a couple of years ago because it was for the 10-year anniversary of this album. But it was an interview with Luke and Tim, who are the two guitar players on this record. And they were basically saying that exactly that. When they first started, jamming when they're all like teenagers, everything was like a punk beat and everything was like power chords. And then they were like, we gotta branch out and try new things. And they said it took them a long time to really get to this level, but this was just, they felt like they wanted to do something to set themselves apart from everybody else.
Now, I think it's interesting that this album was released August 30th, 2005 in Canada, as I mentioned, but it was re-released in the US June of 2006. So almost a full year later, it got a US release. Do you have any inclination as to why?
I don't. I'm not sure if maybe I know some of the stuff that I've seen. I think that was a little bit of a slow burn. Again, in that interview, it's kind of funny. They're talking about basically they would take any tour that was offered to them, even if they weren't like the perfect fit, because I mean, who are they the perfect fit for? They're a very unique band. And they were telling stories about touring Canada, opening for Dragon Force. And the guys were talking about being on stage and people in the audience throwing drinks at them and coming up to them after the show, telling them how much they suck and all this stuff. And I was like, damn, because I saw Between the Buried and Me and Dragon Force together, and that was weird, but everybody was pretty amicable. But yeah, apparently Dragon Force fans are not the biggest Protest the Hero fans.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was actually listening to an interview with Henry Rollins, and they got an opportunity. They got invited by Ozzy Osbourne to open for Black Sabbath, and he said they came out on stage and it was like a stadium full of people, and it was like this, like nothing but this like roar and cheering the whole time. And he was like, "We have all of these fans." And then he said he like stood on side stage when Black Sabbath played. And he was like, "They have all of our fans."
Right.
And it's got to be hard to be a band that sounds so different from the act that you're opening for. And of course, everybody's there to see Dragon Force. I mean, Dragon Force fans are Dragon Force fans. I mean, I think there's some Queensryche crossover.
Well, and two, we're talking about back in 2006, 2007, right, when Dragon Force, you know, they were the Guitar Hero band that everybody knew, and they were, you know, they were really big at that time. So I get what they're saying, though, when you're a band like this. And that's what they were saying. Like, we would tour with metal bands. We would play with emo screamo bands. Like, they weren't afraid to tour with anybody just to try to get in front of some new people that might dig what they're doing. But when you take those risks, obviously there will be some negativity involved too.
So, all right. My feelings about this album are very mixed. I'm going to go ahead and put that up front. It's okay. Like, I really enjoyed what they were doing, but it was like, I kind of felt like they were, I kind of felt like this was like a stepping stone for them. And I feel like they try to put it together a concept album, which is what this is. You know, there's 3 different characters in it, and then the finality, or the finality. I don't, anyway, the finale. Yeah. I don't know why that word was something to trip me up. Anyway. So I feel like they, you know, kind of got to a place where they were like, all right, this is a sound that we're putting out. And what I felt like, actually, musically, this album was Rufio. So that's where I felt like, you know, when I saw they were on Warped Tour, I was like, okay, yeah, I get that. Rufio to me was always like a mathcore band, a math rock band that had like the vocals that just never fit. I never really liked Rufio. It just never worked for me. But I feel like they kind of got to this level. They were like, okay, we need to put out an album. This is kind of what we're thinking. This is what we're feeling. And then it was almost like they started to create this thing, and they kind of got boxed into it. And there's a place later on that I'll point out where I feel like they made a move that I feel like they had to make. Like, they were like, we've got to do this because everybody else is doing it. But it didn't fit, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm interested to see what part that is. For me,
it wasn't bad, but it didn't fit, and I will talk about that.
I got you. Yeah, the Rufio comparison is interesting because you mentioned the vocalist. You never thought the vocalist matched. What do you think about? I think it's Rody, R-O-D-Y. I think that's how you're supposed to say that. The lead vocalist of Protest the Hero. What do you think about his singing style?
So, I was always saying Rody. I feel like it's Rody Walker. I mean, it's, you know, I feel like, who's the wrestler? Rody Rhodes or whatever. Not Randy Rhodes. I don't know. I'm mixing things up. Anyway, I'm stuck on the Black Sabbath thing in my head, or the Ozzy Osbourne thing. Anyway, I feel like he had a fine voice. Now, I'm not sure who all does the screaming and growling on here, but the growl on this is great. I actually really like the growl. I don't like the high-pitched screaming that happens on this in places. I thought Roddy's voice is fine. I don't feel like it's as out of place, anywhere close to out of place as the lead singer of Rufio.
See, for me, being the kind of music that I particularly like to listen to, I love what Roddy's doing here, because most bands in this genre, they just scream a whole bunch. And to me, that takes away. I like bands that are proggy and abstract and all over the place. But if you scream too much, it becomes a little bit tiresome. Like when we talked about I Wrestled a Bear once, the reason I picked that particular album was because it is a great blend of clean vocal and screaming. And I think that the mix of all of the different vocal things going on here, including the female vocal that comes up throughout, her name is, I believe it's Judea Kelly. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Let's just go ahead and put some names with everybody.
Okay.
So I don't, Judea Kelly is what I have. So Jadea. So Judea or Jada? I don't know. Anyway. All right. So lead singer, Brody Walker. Tim Miller is guitars. Mo Carlson is guitars. And then Luke Hoskin is guitar, piano, backing vocals. And then I'm not sure about this last name. The drummer, or excuse me, the bass player.
Drummer is Mo. Mo is the drummer.
I just had that mislabeled. All right. So
Eric is the bass player.
Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce his last name.
Okay, cool. So I don't feel bad about that either. So
they're from Canada, so I think it might be French Canadian names, possibly.
Marta Balfi? I don't know. Anyway.
No, I will say, oh gosh, I don't know. I believe Arif is possibly Middle Eastern or something. I'm not 100% sure. But here's what I'll say. When I saw them live, they were not only super tight, very technical, but Arif goes off. He was so much fun to watch on stage. They all were. They're all a very energetic band. But him in particular, he did this thing where he would like pull his bass up as if it was like a bow and arrow and like shoot it.
Yeah. So,
silly stuff like that I love.
So I feel like this is a great live band. I feel like they would be fantastic. I got a little bit tired of the math guitars. Like at one point I put in here, I don't want to listen to music where I need a calculator to understand it, because I just felt like it was like every song, they just kind of leaned right into that. There's certain places where they don't do that, and I'm like, this is really good. I'm really behind this. There's one song on here that I'm pretty sure is a live song, and I'll get to that when we get there. But, you know, I feel like they kind of locked themselves into making a concept album and locked themselves into being a mathcore band. And I think that ended up hurting this one overall, because I really like the places where they don't do it. There are certain places where they do it, and it's cool. But I don't know. Like I said, it's a very conflicting thing, because I say all that, but I enjoyed this album.
Right. And I was going to bring up Head PE. When we did that episode, I gushed on how much I loved the band Head PE. And then when we got to the final score, my score for the album Broke was not super high. But it was like, this is one of their albums. I have all of them. I've listened to all of them. Protest the Hero is going to be kind of in the same boat. I love this band. Everything from this record all the way up to Pompest, or however you pronounce it, that came out in 2020. Like, I think this is an incredible band. I like their entire discography. But you're right. This is the first one. It's a little sloppy and it's not perfect, but I think it shows this raw energy that they kind of hone and shift around a little bit as their career progresses.
Yeah, and I've always thought it was strange, because people will say, like, you know, their first album was their best one. Bands like this, their first album's not the best one. Now, a band has all the time before they put out an album to write the first album, and then they pretty much are on a schedule after that, to an extent. And I feel like a band like this, now I haven't listened to anything else they've really done. I want to say that, but I haven't listened to anything intently, let's put it that way, because I have heard Protest the Hero before you brought this album to us. And I want to say they've gotten better just being able to really, now you said it took them a long time to get to this point, but they were taking their time getting to this point, not honing this sound and, carving away, cutting off the fat and all that.
Just 2 or 3 years before this album came out, they were a skate punk band,
right?
And they were playing real fast, aggressive punk, hardcore kind of stuff. And then they decided we're going to, they were listening to metal and trying to mix up their sound. So they were like, okay, we're going to learn how to shred like these guys, and we're just going to go for it. So And yeah, I think you're right. In this case, it's not really their first album is their best because this wasn't stuff they had been writing for 10 years. Like this wasn't like the stuff they had been working on from day one. This was like a new shift in sound for them.
Right.
So I agree. I think it does take, honestly, and I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think their next album, Fortress from 2008, is probably their best because it still has the raw energy of this, but they've honed it and they're tightening it up and the songwriting is better. But again, they've got great records all throughout their discography. If you like this, you should check out some of the other stuff. You'll probably like it more.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I won't, at least listen to, I can't say I'm going to listen to an entire album down the road, mainly because most of my album listening is taken up by the show.
Yeah,
but,
true.
I can't say that I won't throw on a track of theirs and whatnot going forward.
And I will say, for as much as I like this band and as much as I love some of the songs on here, there is a certain fatigue factor that can go into something like this because it is just so fast, so sporadic, so many stop starts, different changes that I feel like if you start to get over that 35 to 45 minute mark, it can start to be a little bit much. And then if you're listening to it for our show where you're trying to take notes and you're listening to it repeatedly, you got to sort of just give it a break. Like you got to listen to it one time, walk away, listen to Avril Lavigne or something super chill, and then come back to it.
Yeah, I think I actually listened to this album like 3 times back to back, and then I went and listened to our next 2 albums that we have coming because
yeah,
it was like just changing it up. So what I will say as far as the fatigue goes is it's almost like, this is a 12-track album or 10 tracks, sorry. And it's almost like I got fatigued twice within this album because, like I was talking about, those math rock guitars come in so much. It's like ready for something different. And it was like when they would throw something different, it's like, okay, I'm back.
Yeah. And they do mix it up enough that I think one time from start to finish, you never get bored and you never get fatigued. But it's when, okay, I just finished it, but I want to go back and listen to it again. That's when it can start to become a little bit fatigued. And I will also say this is sort of a double-edged sword. When you're this all over the place, this proggy, it's super exciting the first time you listen to it. And then it's fun to listen to it a couple more times because you start to like pick up on the nuances and all the changes and stuff. But then now you're listening to it 2 or 3, 4 times. Now that fatigue is setting in. So it's kind of a love-hate thing going on there. Yeah. But I will say, like I said, this album, a lot of the things that you're saying that are a little bit like the things that are keeping it from being a great album for you are things that they tweak on later albums. Okay. So I almost picked Fortress as opposed to this one because I do like Fortress more, but I thought, we might do another record down the road. So let's just go ahead and start with the first one.
You could have brought me a better album and you made the conscious decision not to.
This album is still good enough. Don't even act like it ain't.
Hey, you brought me Big Dumb Face at one point. So, all right, track 1. I talked about the 3 different characters, and it's the first character, the first act is the prison priest. And I found this on SputnikMusic.com, and it was a guy that was saying like he had to dig a bit, and he found this, and I was like, this is cool, and I like this. So, all right. So, Act 1, the prison priest, and it actually is tracks 1, 2, and 3. So, track 1, No Stars Over Bethlehem. First off, I want to point out that we do have the emo titles on this album.
Yes, to an extent, but I feel like they do play into the whole concept record thing.
Yeah. No, I get that, and I don't have a problem with the titles on this. They're at least relevant. Let's put it that way.
They're long but relevant.
Yeah. Okay. The intro on this one, it was neat. I felt like, because it was like, it kind of just had this like white noise building almost, and then it just brought you into this like big growl. Which I thought was a great growl to start it out. It wasn't like one of those high pitch, like, you know, stop doing that. It was like, right. That's cool. That's cool. I get it.
And it wasn't one of those like low, like this. Again, that's why I was asking like what you thought about Rhodey's vocals, because they are very unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. And I felt like this track actually set up the album in a really great way, because this track throws you everything that they're about to do. And his vocals, he does enough of the back and forth, while we do get some of that prog sound in there, but it's not an overbearing amount. I mean, this track is only 4 minutes, 25 seconds, which we know is a short prog song.
Yeah, and I bring that up later on in my closing statement, so I won't harp on it too much now. But yeah, I do dig the fact that these are, for the most part, tighter, shorter songs. And so to your point, you know, his vocals and mixing it up, though, I think around the 37-second mark, when he comes in full with that clean, higher registered vocal. What's funny is it's going to just throw people all over the place, because on the one hand, there's parts, especially on some of their newer records, where I hear a lot of Bruce Dickinson and Iron Maiden, like that high operatic singing. But then it's also kind of nasally, sort of in the emo thing, but it's not screaming like most people expect from this style of music.
Right.
So you're that's either going to be a plus or a minus for you when the vocals come in.
Right. So I felt like there was enough metalcore in here, especially in the breakdown of the song.
Yeah. So around 2:12, you have that kind of modern metalcore breakdown. But then I like how at around 2:32, it goes into almost more of like this rock and roll kind of groove. And the way his voice cracks when he says the word "so" at 2:43, every time, smile. Every single time. I love it. It's so cute.
I felt like one of the things that best described this band is like, you know, they've got the punk flavoring on all sorts of places, usually in the drums. It kind of lives there. Yeah. Fast and snare heavy, and it's cool. I've got no problem with it. But I realized something in listening through this so many times, that it's almost like the guitar player, the rhythm guitar player, kind of stays in like this like stoner metal area, like place, like Black Sabbath or Caius or something like that. And he just kind of gives those riffs, which I have no problem with. Caius was the one concert I went to where I felt like I could like see the sound waves in front of the speakers. It was great. They're massive, but it also lives a lot in the bass as well, you know. So, but then it's like they've got like the like stoner rock, stoner metal like riff going on, and then they've got the punk flavoring, and then they've got the metalcore just popping up every once in a while. It's almost like it's just peppered with like the mathcore guitar. And then talking about just throwing everything out there, there's this part that starts around 2:56 that really has a Rush Dream Theater kind of choppy little syncopated thing happening that just adds to that progness that we keep talking about. So I agree. I think this is a great album opener because it kicks in real strong. And then for the duration, gives you little tastes of just about everything that they're going to be playing with on the album. Yeah. So track 2, Heretics and Killers.
This was the first song that I heard. This was the first one that was brought to my attention, and it blew me away. That choppy intro with the heavy riff and the little neoclassical little runs mixed in. But when it does that boom, it's just, and kicks in super heavy. But then when the vocals kick in, it's just acoustic guitar and this soaring clean vocal.
They call me the man with the blood of Christ on his team, but do not.
I was getting chills, like, and I still do sometimes when I haven't heard it in a long time and I put it on. This song just tugs at my heart. Like, I love the first like minute or so of this song is just perfect.
I had a little bit of trouble with this track. And
I'll
tell you why. Because for some reason, I didn't take notes on this track until like the 5th time I've listened through to this album. And like I took notes on every other track, and then I realized it was like I haven't taken a single note on track 2. And so at this point, I told you I've got the note on here, and it's on this one, is I like what the guitars are doing when I don't need a calculator, because I felt like the parts that weren't math rock were the best parts of this. That acoustic guitar is fine. I've got no problem with it, but I just kind of was burnt out on the math guitars by the time I'd come back around to this one so many times.
Well, and that's what we were saying earlier about the fatigue. You know, this is such a chaotic album that after 35, 40, 45, 50 minutes of it, you're sort of like your brain is getting a little bit, fried after that. But on your first time through, to me, this song, like the first song is really good. It's a great intro. But then this song is like a special. Like this is something special. And speaking of which, I love the intro. I love the chugginess and then the clean vocal and stuff. But then there's this really cool section that starts around 2:12 that's really unique. It's heavy, but it's catchy and it's huge. And then it like goes out on this almost like whimsical, like it's almost like the like dream sounds that you hear on a TV show.
There is a really cool thing, and I only listened to this once through headphones, and I really didn't feel like headphones added a whole lot to it. But this track is great through headphones. And it's all because of that piece of the cake part where it kind of just bounces back and forth.
Yes.
And it's cool.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm glad you said something. Do you have to have headphones? No. Do you catch some cool stuff every once in a while? Yes, because exactly that. That's not the only time they do that. There's a lot of parts where you'll hear like just one guitar, and then you'll hear, and then the bass bump. But it's coming from 3 different places in the mix.
Yeah.
And you'll notice it in speakers, but you'll really notice it in headphones. I don't even know why I'm asking because I already know the answer. Did you watch the music video for this?
No.
Okay. This is another thing that makes me like these guys. We've talked about this before. Some of these bands can take themselves super seriously. Protest the Hero does not, which makes me happy. The music video for this, they're all dressed in very detailed costumes like the flying monkeys from the Wizard of Oz. Essentially what happens is after the Wicked Witch is dead, they're all out of work. And so it's them trying to like, they're all dressed as the flying monkeys. One's like a waiter in a restaurant and one's like playing guitar on the street trying to get money. It's very funny. It's really cool.
I've never given any thought to what happened to the flying monkeys, but in Clerks, they talk about how there were construction workers and just people doing their jobs, their daily jobs when the Death Star blew up.
I've been playing a Star Wars video game, and you're right. Like a lot of these guys that I am just murdering with my lightsaber are just there for a paycheck.
Yeah.
Like they don't care about the rebellion or the empire. They're just trying to put food on the table, and I am murdering them. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's some kid who's not going to have dad at dinner thanks to you.
Thanks to the Force.
All right, so track 3, Divinity Within. this was one of the 2 tracks I found that was actually in other places. So it was on the soundtrack to NHL 07.
Really?
Yeah. This is the only video
Okay.
game one that I found. But and I thought it was funny, or not funny, but I thought it was kind of strange because the album came out in 2006, and then it's like as the game was coming out, like was being made, they put this song in there. So it makes you feel like somebody over at whoever makes the NHL games likes Protest the Hero.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool.
This is good hockey music.
Yeah.
They're from Canada. Makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, hockey. Anyway, all right. This one has a little too many changes back and forth between the math rock and then the metalcore. It kind of jumps back and forth a little too much for me. I did like this track, but it was almost like they just couldn't decide which they wanted this one to be.
So one of the really funny things, and I'm not sure off the top of my head, like thinking about it, but one of the funny things in that interview with Tim and Luke, the guitar players, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he said that they were writing with a lot of bad habits. You're learning how to shred and you're learning how to be technical. Sometimes you do things that seem like the right thing in the moment, but ultimately that's not the proper way, technique, blah, blah, blah. And he said, we wrote a lot of things that aren't ergonomically comfortable. Like we would write something where we would be playing on, the high 15th, 16th frets and then have to shoot back down to like the 2nd and 3rd fret, like within a second.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when you said that back and forth thing, it just reminded me of that. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
This one's not one of my favorites on the album.
Okay, so there's a note I have here that really applies to a lot of this album where I feel like, so the end of this track, this is a track that moves pretty quick. And the end of this track has that piano crescendo. And the thing is that, okay, this is 4 minutes, 32 seconds. Before the piano part starts, for about 45 seconds before that, it's a damn good track. Like, I like it. And one of the things about this album that's kind of funny is the intros are short. There's no intro that really wowed me. But it's like this back chunk of almost every track on this album, I think is great. And it's almost like I like if you were to give me an entire album of just like the back end of each song, I would really like it. I would. I think it's great. Once that piano starts, I'm like, it's a little bit too clean. Like the production on it is just too clean.
Yeah. I'm wondering, obviously with the concept record part of it, it's very split. 3 songs, and then a closing sort of summary. So maybe they didn't want to do this, but I almost feel like this one, and there's 1 or 2 other parts later where a little piano interlude could have been its own track.
Right.
Like, you've got all this momentum built up from this really fast, heavy, kinetic song. And then, like you said, it ends and you have this really clean, almost classical sounding piano bit. I like it. It sounds pretty. It's very well played. It just feels like if I'm not in it for the story and I'm in it to rock, I just want to go to the next song at that point.
Right. Okay, so that piano closes it out. And I think it's a really strange thing because I feel like that piano actually leads to the beginning of the next song, which is a completely different beginning, but it just kind of flowed for whatever reason. So, all right, that's the end of Act 1. We are entering into Act 2, which is the executioner / prison guard. This is my favorite section of the album. I'm just going to go ahead and put it up front. So, track 4, Bury the Hatchet. I thought this was a funny detail I found about this because I don't remember Guitar Hero songs that were like this at all, but you could actually get this one for Guitar Hero 2. And I would be really interested to see somebody try to play this on Guitar Hero.
So after the success of Guitar Hero 1, they actually made it to where bands could just about upload, any band could just about upload any song.
Yeah.
And it was because honestly, Dragon Force became a sensation overnight thanks to that game. A lot of other bands like kind of threw their hat in the ring too. Right. So it doesn't shock me that they would put stuff out like this almost as like a, try this one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it'd be fun to watch somebody do it, but I don't know. All right. This has got to be, or this starts, let's put it that way. This starts as the most metal song on this album.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The opening riff is cool, but I like when the rhythm kind of shakes up around the 16-second mark.
Yeah. That's when that metal intro just kind of comes to an end, and then it switches into this thrash metal song with a punk flavor.
Yeah, it's very, I don't want to say traditional hardcore metalcore, but it's not as math rock. It's not as, technical. It's a little more straightforward, aggressive. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned before where I talked about the screams. This is actually the one place where you'll actually hear Rhodey Walker scream. The rest of the screams are done by the bassist, Arif, and the guitarist, Tim. That's where the rest of the screams live. But I thought the screams were fine on this. I feel like the screams were probably the weakest part of the song because actually that is a really good song.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's the rhythm of the guitars are really neat. There's some cool chugs. And if you listen, the bass is doing some gnarly runs up and down behind it. I really like the kind of sleazy vibe that you get around 2:45. I swear I have compassion. I've just been trained to disregard the business. Goes back into that classic rock sound a little bit for a second. This one also has a really funny outro. Yeah. This is the one that does the riff and then stops, and then the volume comes down a little bit. They do the riff again, stops, volume comes down a little bit again. I thought that was just another example of them not taking themselves too seriously.
Yeah, I actually put on here that I really like the ending because I like the way that it didn't fade out. It kind of tapered off.
Because and I know that you don't love songs that fade out. No. And there is a couple on here that do that. I don't feel real strongly one way or the other, but I know you don't love fade outs. So
no, but I didn't mind it on this album.
Okay, because I was thinking about that when some of them come up. I was like, oh man, he's not going to like that. I don't think there's any tambourine though.
No tambourine. If there is, it got lost. So yeah, no tambourine. Which, by the way, you just can't see an angry tambourine player. You can't be mad playing tambourine.
What's funny is you can't be mad while playing it, but you can piss off a lot of people in the audience by playing it.
Yes, you can. All right, track 5, Nautical. This was the first new song from this album available. So when they started putting out tracks from this album, this was the first one people could get. This doesn't sound like the rest of the album to me.
It does. I think it fits. It's still got all the same shreddy kind of technical guitar stuff. I love that opening riff. I love that they actually, sometimes with these kind of bands, they play a part. It's really cool. That's it. You're not going to hear that piece again. But they actually repeat that guitar lick. Yeah, which I appreciate for sure. And I wonder if maybe part of the reason they released this one is because, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, I think this is the shortest song.
Well, this is album. 2 minutes 20 or 2 minutes 57 seconds. So I think you're right. It may be the shortest. But this was one where I really, and I didn't know that they were a punk band before, but this is one where I really felt like the punk roots of it all. And it's like you could feel it in this in a way that kind of just makes sense for this album. You know, I think this is a good song. Like I said, this may be my favorite chunk of the album, you know, 4, 5, 6. I thought it was good, but I don't think it's really sounds like the rest of the album.
I think it does. I think the part that really, unfortunately, the part that I think really connects it to the rest of the album is probably honestly my least favorite part of the song, which is sort of the outro ending section that starts around 2:35. There's something about his vocal melody with the guitar, the lead line underneath it. For my ears, it kind of clashes a little bit. It doesn't sound bad. It's all very technically proficient. There's a dissonant to it that, hey, these guys are smart. That's probably what they were going for. But I don't particularly like it.
Yeah. All right. Track 6.
But other than that one little section, I think it's a great song.
Okay. Track 6, Blindfolds Aside. Impressive vocals and great melodic guitar parts. I think that's what has the best solo on the entire album.
Yes. Okay. So,
but wait, which solo? Because I feel like this song had like 3 different solos in it, and it's like there's one solo where he starts the solo, and then Rhodey starts singing on top of it, which we've talked about. You know, gets under her skin. But here, I just kind of was like, okay, you know,
because,
and then realized that he had a full solo later.
Right. And half of the riffs on this album are, put it this way, a Protest the Hero riff is a guitar solo for most rock and metal guitar players.
Okay. I mean, that's cool. Okay. So what I felt like was odd about the solo on this is the solo starts at like 2 minutes, but then it really starts at 2:05.
Yes, so 2:05 to about 2:34 is honestly one of my favorite parts on the entire album. It's this gorgeous guitar line. It's technical, but it's not as shreddy and noodly as some of their other stuff. It's a little more lyrical. I love the way that it's EQ'd. It sounds just like $1,000,000. And then if you listen, there's this guitar and bass tapping that follows it that is really, really nice too. That whole section is awesome.
Yeah, you're talking about the tapping harmonics that start in around, what was it, 2:30? And
yeah, shortly after the solo, it kind of ramps up.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a whole great part. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, like, I really thought that the solo was the best part of this whole track. I liked the track, but we get the part on here that I was talking about. Wasn't bad, wasn't needed.
So, are we talking about the kind of outro acoustic guitar jam?
Yep. So the song is 5 minutes 59 seconds, and at 4:16 it changes into that acoustic thing.
Sin I didn't care for, but a sin that paid my debts.
Now this introduces the female singer. I'm going to call her Jade because I feel like Jade is more of a name, not Jade or whatever you were calling her.
They're Canadian. They're French. Judea. I'm sure that's it.
Sure, whatever. Jade
Call
Kelly.
her Kelly. Last name's Kelly.
Yeah. So this part where I feel like it was here to introduce Kelly because we had not heard her before this, and I think she's great, and I actually think that this acoustic part is great, but I don't feel like it needs to be here. Because it's for almost 2 minutes. It should have been its own thing. And I feel like this is where they said, everybody else has an acoustic song on their album. We need to give the album a slowdown. Because this entire album, every track is is up there. I feel like this was the slowdown that they were trying to offer, but I don't feel like it worked to tack it on to the end of a different track. Just make it its own thing.
Yeah, like I was saying about the piano thing at the end of Bury the Hatchet.
Yeah.
If you're trying to keep the track listing at an even 10 for your concept record to flow,
Yeah.
I understand doing it the way you're doing it. But yeah, like these little things wouldn't be bad as ancillary tracks that you can skip over if you want to. I'm personally, I think it's really cool, and I like the kind of acoustic guitar noodling that he does. And I think that it's just short enough that I'm not like bothered by it. Like if it went on for too much longer, I think I would start to get tired of it. But I think it's a good enough length that it doesn't bother me.
Okay, so here's an idea for any band wanting to put out an album, and you've got something like this, you know, this short little thing that you want to throw in there, but you don't want to mess up like the even number of a track listing, you know, a 10, a 12, or whatever. But you don't want to let this part go. Why not make it like a 6.5? You know, give us a 0.5 or like a 0.2 or whatever. You know, why not?
Okay, so what you're saying is if I pick up an album and look at the back of it, it would say track 6, Blindfolds Aside. And then it would say track 6.5, Acoustic Ditty Jam. And then track 7 would be the next song. Is that what you're implying?
Well, I wouldn't put Diddy into anything, but yeah.
He put himself into enough.
That's true. That's true. But yes, that's what I'm saying. Like it would have a 6.5.
That is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard, and I would like to move on.
All right. So so Act 2 is done. We're on to track 3, Kezia. Track 7, She Who Mourns the Skin of Gods.
Mars.
Oh, I've got a typo. So yes, Mars. She Who Mars the Skin of Gods, which, let me say, great title.
Yes,
I actually
right.
really like that title. It's very much an emo title, but I like that title.
So you mentioned a minute ago that the second act is probably your favorite. And I have a real hard time picking a favorite act because I think my 3 favorite songs off this album, one comes from each act. So I can't really say like this is my favorite stretch because it's all like a song that I absolutely love and then some that I like. So it's really hard for me to say, but this is another one that I think is really good. It does a lot of the same things that some of the other songs do. It's just not I don't know. It doesn't quite hold my attention as well as some of the other ones do.
Okay, so this is where we go back into what I was saying before about the last chunk of tracks is really good. And I feel like that
Yes.
it's kind of true for every song from here on out. And I do like the intro on this track.
Yes.
It's great. Yeah, it's cool, but it just kind of goes into another fast punk kind of song that does the mathcore thing.
Now, but what I will say that I think is really cool about these guys versus what's a real wacky one, like Meshuggah or Animals as Leaders or one of those kind of bands, is you can still nod your head along. Like, yes, the guitars are doing these weird syncopated chugs. Yes, the drums can get a little bit like off kilter, but you can still nod along. Like there's still this steady like flow to it. Where those bands, like you said, you have to literally count like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Like that's cool when you're in the mood for it.
Right.
But at no point, even when these guys do start to get like kind of off kilter and off like out of sync, it's still got that like rhythm to it that you can still like flow along with it.
See, I kind of feel like this had like the melody and it was all cool. And then it just kind of became confusing because they wanted to keep going math rock. And it was,
yeah, and I will say that there's this section that starts around 148 that has this kind of tribal drum thing and some just insane like double hammer-on pull-off tapping stuff going on the bass and the guitars. That's really cool.
yeah, I mean, it was a cool track, and that part, correct me if I'm wrong, but that part's towards the end of the song. And
You're right.
Yeah.
The first chunk, first half or so, is very shreddy math rock, metalcore kind of stuff, and then the back half they start to get a little weird and start to get a little bit experimental. And like, yeah, you're right. That's the part that you prefer.
yeah. So track 8, Turn Soonest to the Sea.
I remember when you were hopeful, never thought your life would be lived inside a coffin with tomorrow.
I don't have a ton of notes on this one because I love everything about this song from start to finish.
This was a cool one. I like the sing-along at the end.
Maybe someday when this bloody skull has struck.
That is, okay. So you mentioned something about a song being specifically for the live show.
This one
I
is.
assume this is, yeah.
Yeah.
So in that interview, I can't remember. I think it was Tim, might have been Luke, one of the guitar players. They were talking about how over the years this has become like a fan favorite because of the sing along and stuff. And he was like, I'm really looking forward to people kind of refreshing their memory on this album so they will sing this back to us, because I have to sing it live and I don't like to. I'm a terrible singer and I hate it. And the guitar player next to him's like, yeah, I know, I'm standing next to you. It's awful. But I like the lyrics. From what I'm gathering of the lyrics, I really like what they're saying here. I love the like gang vocals and the chanting there at the end, but I also just love the guitar work. It's so precise. Dude, everything about this song, just, I love it. Absolutely love it.
I didn't hate this one at all. This was, I put it as a mathcore breakdown song because it was like, it felt like there were lots of breakdowns within the song, or several breakdowns. And it was there's a lot of mathcore. It was like mathcore breakdown. It was, the breakdowns were bridged by that. But it had a fun sing along. And I do know that it's a fan favorite at concerts. And then there's that little sound clip at the end. Do you know what that's from? Where he says, ready, aim, and then it goes to the next song. The only thing I could find is from a Disney movie. That's the only thing I could find.
Interesting.
Yeah. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I thought it was actually the beginning of the next song, but I guess I wasn't paying attention and I just knew it after the... It's
like the very end, and then it goes into track 9, Divine Suicide of K. But it works as that transition.
Yeah.
It was, I had to like really pay attention to it, and because it worked so well. So
unfortunately, this one to me, the Divine Suicide of K, falls victim of the old track placement thing, because I don't think this is a bad song. I just think coming off of that huge anthemic sing-along closing of the track before it just doesn't, I don't know. Like it honestly, a lot of times by the time I'm done with Turn Soonest to the Sea, I'm kind of checked out of the album at that point because I love that song so much. But this isn't bad. It's still got a lot of the same tropes of some of the other songs. It's still really good. I feel like if you weren't trying to keep the chunks the way they are to tell your story and you rearrange the track listing a little bit, I would put this up a little higher in the tracks, and I think it would stick with me better.
So by the time that I got to the end of track 6, I was kind of starting to like go into a fatigue with this album. And
Already.
what-
Just a little bit past the halfway mark, you were already there.
because it kind of it felt like a lot of the same stuff. Mathcore breakdowns. And then track 8 comes and it's like, you know, the first half is kind of that same sort of thing. And then the last half, it gets very different. And then we get that sing along and I'm like, okay, this is a cool thing. And then we go into Divine Suicide of K. And I put a note here that I feel like is probably what describes this album, which is math guitar wanking.
Which is funny. I was just going to say, being a guitar player, I love a lot of that stuff, but my favorite section of this song is the very soft poppy section that's from about 156 to 230. That's my favorite part of this song.
Yeah. And the thing about it was this one, okay, fantastic punk drumming throughout this track. I actually really like the drumming on this one. And so that kind of kept me into it. But I think the song got better at the section you're talking about. And then I really enjoyed the breakdown at 324. And then it followed this great little growl at 315. It was like, this is cool. But I feel like this was two different songs they smashed together.
Yeah, I feel like once you get to that poppier section and into the back half of the song, especially when the female vocal comes in and they start singing together, sounds gorgeous. I think it sounds great. But yeah, it feels a little disconnected from the first half, whereas most of these songs do have all these movements and different pieces, but they feel cohesive. This one, not quite as cleanly.
Yeah, this felt like they had two songs, one without the female, one with the female, and it's like they just smashed them together into one song.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's to tell the story, cool, but this one, the first chunk of the song kind of just took me out of it. The last chunk of the song was like, okay, we're cool. This is like, it's almost like that poppy section made me more okay with it, and then we get that metalcore ending.
And that's why I said, obviously, these tracks are deliberately placed to tell the story that they're telling. But musically, I think this song would resonate better higher up in the tracks. Because by track 9, you know, track 3 or 4, this would still feel a little fresh and exciting. But now that you're in the back half, it's just a little bit more the same. And we're starting to get nitpicky about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Let's round it out with the finale, Clarification, the last part of this this concept album. Track 10, A Plate Full of Our Dead. Another great track title.
Yes.
You know, serve his head on a silver platter. I don't know. I like that. So, all right. Great open on this track. Great intro.
Super heavy.
Oh, yeah. Just comes in. It's like they just pushed all the chips in on this track. Yep. It's like they took everything else that the album was and they went, you know what? We're going all in.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
And I didn't hate it. It felt disjointed. This track felt like they just couldn't figure out what they were doing or decide what they were doing. Let's put it that way. Because they were just pushing everything in. I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
But it was also very confusing for me.
This is another one that I like a lot of it. It's not one of my favorites either. But I love that section that starts around 150. It has this really great like bass, like tapping bass line and these guitars. Feels very Iron Maiden-esque right there, which I'm always going to be happy about that. And then there's these like 3-part vocal harmonies that come in shortly after that are really, really nice. And then again, we've been talking about these little outros and stuff with the pianos and the acoustic guitars and stuff. It sort of makes sense to go out with something like that here.
I didn't hate it. And the thing about it is those outros, I never hated any of them. But this one, okay, this track is 4 minutes, 29 seconds to close out the album. And I understand that it makes sense, but it's like the song faded out to 3 minutes. Like, it ended at 3 minutes. I would have been cool if that had happened. But then we learn what happens when you hand an acoustic guitar to a math rock guitar player. You get classical guitar.
I was just getting ready to say, though, out of all of the little outros and existential pieces mixed in at the, in between songs, this one's probably my favorite. I like,
nice.
Like, it's a nice mix of like really pretty, but also this kind of dark, sinister feel to it. Mm-hmm. I think it's a cool vibe to go out on. Yeah.
I didn't hate it. I would have appreciated more of a transition and not just a fade out to it.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay. Monster, what's new with you?
Hey, good looking. What you got? Cooking.
So, I know you've kind of said this before, and you said it's not a cop-out, so I want to say, too, this isn't a cop-out. This is my honest answer. I'd say about 10 to 20 seconds of every song.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
There's nothing new metal going on here. They just every once in a while will have like one little section where the rhythm will kind of go to a little bit more of a bounce or a little bit more locked into something kind of heavy. They do a little bit more of that on later albums because I think as they kind of mature, they don't slow down necessarily, but they just kind of tighten up a little bit. So sometimes they will kind of bounce and groove for a couple measures longer. But yeah, I would say about 10 to 20 seconds of each song somewhere.
That's fair. That's fair. I get that because I wouldn't describe this album as a new metal album as I didn't before.
Right.
Yeah.
So Danger, what's cooking?
Bury the Hatchet. I think that Bury the Hatchet was just the best song on this album. I enjoyed that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I was saying before, my 3 favorites are Heretics and Killers, which is from the first section. And then my second favorite is Blindfold Aside, which is part of the second section. And then my absolute favorite is Turn Soonest to the Sea, which is from the third section. So
right.
It's hard to pick a favorite section.
No, that's fair. I just really enjoyed that Executioner section. And yeah. I don't know if the Executioner part of it had anything to do with it, but I just enjoyed that section.
Yeah, it might. I don't know.
All right. You want to give me your closing statement?
Yeah, I'll go first. Why not? Progressive metal has been around since the late 60s, and it comes in many flavors. Protest the Hero manages to use inspiration from a lot of those pioneers while crafting a sound wholly their own. These guys are incredible musicians who manage to write technical prog music that is somehow catchy and easily digestible, which is no easy feat. Blending prog, technical metal, and thrash metal with flashes of punk, pop, and folk, nobody else sounds like this. On top of that, you have a vocalist that adds to the uniqueness by having soaring, clean vocals as opposed to low guttural screaming like a lot of their contemporaries use. Other prog acts like to meander for 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 minutes or more for one song. Most of the songs on this album are tight and punchy with several distinct parts that jump in and out with little to no warning. There are a few longer songs, but they don't feel long at all because they don't meander. They jump from part to part and stay interesting. The first time listening to this record is a blistering roller coaster ride. However, subsequent listens could lead to a bit of fatigue, and the novelty can wear off a little bit. I also think this is the type of band that you really have to be in the mood for sometimes. With all that being said, Protest the Hero is a fantastic band that has a solid discography. In my opinion, they don't have a bad album. And if you like what you've heard here, I would highly recommend giving their other albums, a couple of spins. When you're in the mood for it, of course. 1 to 10, I went with a 6.98.
Playing overly technical songs does not make you better than someone who plays simple ones. Throwing gang vocals in every now and then won't improve the quality of your hardcore dynamics. It's obvious these guys could play their instruments and they wrote a good album with some catchy parts. But it's also true that they have overcomplicated the hardcore formula. Kezia is more or less the Rube Goldberg of hardcore albums. It's fun to watch and you can watch it again, but in the end you're just lighting the same candle. With that being said, this is a good album, and that should be in collections or on playlists next to The Amity Affliction, Silverstein, and My Chemical Romance. I gave this album a 6.58.
Woo, pretty close.
Yeah. So that gives this album a 6.78, putting it into the 16th position, right below Drugs and right above The Used. If you disagree with the score that we have given this album, then please shoot us an email at breakdownsbreakfast@gmail.com. Head on over to the Facebook page for Breakdowns for Breakfast and leave us a message there. Let us know what album you'd like for us to talk about. And Monster, what album are we listening to next week?
Next week, we are listening to Homesick, the 2009 album By a Day to Remember. What do you call a breakfast superhero?
What?
The Creped Crusader.